Okay, we are going to go through our last little video clip here on the cardiovascular unit, and it's going to be finishing up with the blood vessels. So, cardiovascular means heart and blood vessels. Vascularity refers to blood vessels. So, let's talk a little bit about the vessels. So, the heart is a pump, and the pump its job is to pump blood to the body. So, how is the blood going to get there? Well, it's going to get there through our blood vessels. And we really have three different types of blood vessels in the human body. Let's run through them. So the three types of blood vessels are going to be arteries, veins, and capillaries. The little trick to remember is arteries go away. So think AA, arteries away. Arteries go away from the heart and veins go to the heart. And arteries and veins are going to meet up at a certain area everywhere in the body in something called a capillary bed. Capillaries are the small blood vessels which actually allow for blood to drop off oxygen and pick up carbon dioxide and all the stuff that we need. So let's go through that now. So like most things in the body, there are three layers. So arteries and veins have three layers. And the three layers are named based on a little bit about them. So tunic, think tunic clothing, right? A tunic is a shirt, that they would wear in medieval times. So that's where this comes from. Tunica, it's a covering. Intima means intimate, and this is going to be inside. So this is going to be the innermost layer of the blood vessels, and it's a single layer of squamous cells. So remember, squamous cells are the flattened ones. So this is a thin single layer of squamous cells, and the purpose of these squamous cells is to allow for filtration, and it allows for blood flow. And the tunica intima actually has the ability to secrete a substance. We talked about heparin before, and it slows down blood flow. In instances where you get injured or cut, you want your blood to not flow as quickly or as easily, and this will slow blood flow down. The tunica media is the middle layer, and think media, medium, middle, and it makes up the majority of the blood vessel. So it's that thick inner layer, and it's mostly muscle, right? And it's going to be smooth muscle. And this is what allows your blood vessels to expand and contract. So, for example, if you were in a fight or flight situation, I've talked about this before, your adrenaline or your epinephrine, norepinephrine would trigger the fight or flight response. And one of the things that would happen is blood flow would get moved from your digestive tract to your muscles. And the way that's accomplished is the blood vessels in your digestive area are going to constrict, not allowing as much blood flow, and the blood vessels in your muscles going towards your muscles are going to expand, allowing an increased blood flow. So this is just what allows for blood flow to be controlled, and it's pretty cool. And then finally, the tunica externa, think external or outer, and that is made up of connective tissue, and that connective tissue is going to allow for attachment to the surrounding tissues around it. You want your blood vessels to stay where they are. And if they were just kind of in there loosely and they weren't attached to anything, every time you moved or shifted or pushed, or, did anything, your blood vessels would also shift. And eventually that could cause some real problems. So the tunica externa has this outer coating, which allows it to attach to the surrounding tissue. Now, arteries and veins are not the same. They have a similar job. They both allow for blood flow, but the difference is arteries, blood going away from the heart, and veins are going towards the heart. So there are a couple things about them that allow them to do their jobs better. The first big difference is the thickness of the tunica media. So if you take a look here, this is an artery and this is a vein, right? And the arteries have a thicker muscular wall, that thicker tunica media. And those smooth muscles are going to expand and contract. And the reason why we have that thicker artery wall is because our arteries are responsible for sending blood to the areas of the body to drop off oxygen. So that's the part that we need to control more. So if you want to cut off oxygen to a part of your body and send it somewhere else, that is going to be done with this tunica media. Now, you still have a tunica media in the veins. The veins can still contract and expand. It's just more functional in the artery, so it's thicker there. And the other difference is veins have valves. Remember, vein starts with V, valve starts with V. Well, your feet are down on the ground and your heart is up in your chest. So how the heck is the blood going to get all the way from the bottom of your foot all the way up to your heart without a heart being down there, right? There's no pump in your feet pushing blood upwards. And the way that's done is with these valves. So as blood gets forced upwards and it passes through the valve, it prevents the blood from being able to drop back down. Now, the analogy I have for that is a roller coaster. If you've ever been on a roller coaster before, as you're going up that big hill before you do the big drop, you might hear that clicking sound, like click, 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 click. What you're hearing is as the roller coaster goes past a certain point, there's a little block there. There's something that blocks the roller coaster from falling backwards. So as it passes that little junction there where it prevents it from falling backwards, it can keep going up the hill without falling back. Well, that's essentially how the vein works. As blood passes up through the blood vessel, gravity wants to pull it back downwards, but these valves prevent that from happening. So we have valves in our veins, but not in our arteries. And finally, we got to talk about our capillaries. So the capillaries is where the actual gas exchange occurs. Imagine a superhighway. Imagine the Pennsylvania Expressway, right? If you're on the turnpike and you're driving off the turnpike, you can't just turn off of the road, right? You have to get off an exit. If let's say you're passing something, you want to get off the road, you can't get off the road until you see an exit. So think of the arteries and veins as like a huge superhighway. You can't just get on and off it when you want to. You can only get on and off it when you have an exit. So think of the capillaries as the exit. Everywhere in your body, you have capillary beds, and it's the area where the blood vessels get extremely thin, and it allows for gas exchange. Oxygen can come out, and carbon dioxide can come back in. So let's talk a little bit about that, how that happens. So the capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, and they connect to what are called arterioles, which the artery branches off into a smaller blood vessel called an arteriole, and that arteriole eventually fuses with the capillaries. And then the capillaries are going to fuse with what's called a venule, which eventually goes to a vein, which goes back to the heart. So what ends up happening is when these blood vessels get smaller and smaller and smaller, they eventually get to the capillary. And the capillaries are 1 cell thick. Now, that's really thin, right? And that is because oxygen has to diffuse through it and carbon dioxide has to diffuse in. So think of it like an exit, right? When you get off at an exit, there is a toll booth. And that toll booth, it's 1 car at a time. And by having these blood vessels get so small, what that does is it slows down these blood cells. So only 1 red blood cell can pass through at a time. And it slows the blood down enough that oxygen can get off and carbon dioxide could get on. If we tried to do that in the artery here, they'd be flying through. It would be like trying to drive through a toll booth at full speed and be able to exchange money with the toll booth collector. It's not going to work. You're going to shoot right past them at 80 miles an hour, and they're not going to be able to get their money, and you're not going to be able to get your ticket, right? So these capillaries are so thin and they're so tiny that these blood vessels have to slow down. The blood has to slow down, drop off its oxygen, and pick up its carbon dioxide. And it does that at this capillary bed. This is just another diagram to show the capillary bed. So you can see this is going to be your oxygenated blood coming from the heart. It's going to pass through. It's going to drop off its oxygen into the cells that are in this area. It's going to pick up the carbon dioxide from those cells, and then it's going to send it to the vein to go back to the heart to get pumped to the lungs. So now it's not like each individual cell has a blood vessel going directly to it. The cells are going to be in this area here, and then through diffusion, as long as it's close enough to that blood vessel, it's going to get its needed oxygen. How does the actual oxygen and everything move through and out of the blood vessels? It does that through pressure, okay? So water and substances leave the capillaries because of outward pressure, and they go back into the capillaries because of inward pressure. So I'm going to flip to this next diagram to show you how that works. So if you take a look here, this would be the artery side. So this is the blood that has oxygen in it coming from the heart, and this is the side that is the vein side. So obviously, if the heart pushed blood, there's more pressure coming from this side, right? So there's going to be more pressure inside the blood vessel than outside the blood vessel. So because of that, that's going to force blood out, and not necessarily blood, but it's going to push water out and any other component in that blood. And these are the cells here. They're going to soak up all that good oxygen. And at this point now, we have more pressure going out. But once that occurs, now there's more pressure here, right? So the pressure's left the arterial end, and now there's more pressure outside. So what that does is it forces the blood back into the capillary on the vein side. So blood leaves, drops off what it needs to drop off. These tissue cells get rid of their carbon dioxide and any other waste. That gets put back into the blood vessel, and then it travels back to the heart to get oxygenated and started all over again. So just know that blood coming from the artery side is going to have more pressure, forcing blood out. And then once it passes through this area here, now there's going to be more pressure outside, forcing it in, which is then going to go back to the heart to get picked up and do its thing. Finally, a little more about the capillaries. So the capillaries are built for things to go in and out, right, for diffusion. So, I'm going to actually bring up a picture real quick because it's kind of hard to visualize this. So if you take a look here, I drew a little blood vessel. And the thing that you have to remember is that a blood vessel is not a solid tube. It's made up of lots of individual cells that make up the walls of these capillaries. So these are going to be all squamous cells. Well, in some parts of the body, there's going to be little gaps. So if you take a look at this arrow, so something inside the cell can get out, and then this arrow here shows going in. So the bigger those gaps are, the easier it is for things to get in and out of the cells, in and out of the blood vessel, and the tighter. So if you take a look down here, I drew them much closer together. If something tried to get in or out, it wouldn't be able to. It would be blocked. So having those little openings makes a difference. Let's just take a look back at this here. Okay, so if I go through that same idea, depending on the different parts of the body, if you want diffusion to occur, there's going to be bigger gaps. So for example, in the spleen, the liver, the red marrow, those are the parts of the body where like the red marrow is making red blood cells. The spleen is going to be storing blood and producing some hormones. The liver, it's part of the endocrine system there. The liver is going to be making all these proteins. So these are areas where things are getting on and off. And your digestive system, you're going to have much larger gaps between the cells to allow for substances to go in and out. Your brain, on the other hand, you don't want things getting in and out other than oxygen. Your brain is very susceptible to toxins or anything else. So in your brain, those cells are going to be super tightly packed together, so it's really hard for things to get in and out. So the brain is protected. That is called the blood-brain barrier. And those capillaries around the brain are going to allow very few substances to pass through. And it really is just for protecting your brain. So the capillaries, depending where in the body they are, they're going to have a little more gaps between the cells to allow for easier diffusion, and some of them are going to have much tighter packed cells to prevent that diffusion. And that's all we got for the cardiovascular system. Thank you very much.